Hey, this week on Idle Talk, we have Andy back again. We're going to talk about photo books and some general idle goodness. Here we go. Hello, hello.
Hi, David. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Yeah, you too. You hear me okay?
Yeah. Do you ever play? You ever play this game called Tumblestone?
No.
It's like this puzzle, like kind of, not exactly like Bejeweled, but it's got the same kind of like, color coded shapes, feel, kind of goofiness. It's very like a casual puzzle game for people.
Okay.
Yeah, it's terrible because I just started playing that 2 days ago, and I don't know, I can't stop playing it. It's so frustrating too because I'll spend like 45 minutes on one level not being able to pass it, and then I'll pass like 7 levels straight first try, and then I'll just hit one where I'm stuck on it for like hours. And I didn't go to sleep till like 5:30 this morning, and I was like, oh gosh, I hope I can wake up. And there's no problem. I've been up for like an hour and a half. Just
And is this a game that you have to pay if you want to do better?
no, well, I don't know. Maybe on the phones. On the phones, maybe it's like that. But I bought it for the Switch, the Nintendo Switch,
Oh,
and
okay.
and it's normally like, I want to say it's $15 normally, and like I guess nobody was buying it because they lowered it to like $6 last week, and I was like, oh, for $6, I'll check it out, no problem.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
it's terrible because it's just been, I don't know what it is. I'm like seeing shapes right now, like my eyes all blurry. I hate myself right now, really.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So you're
so
enjoying your Switch?
yeah, I'm enjoying my Switch a lot. Yeah, it's great because I'm like play it in bed a lot and then play it and then like on the go too. So it's been really
See,
great.
that doesn't sound like a good thing at all because you just described
Oh yeah.
every waking minute
Oh,
basically
yeah, it's
being on
absolutely
the
terrible in that
Switch.
sense. Absolutely. But I try to do a lot of like, I try to record all my footage when I play. So a lot of times I don't play games unless it's connected to the computer and I'm recording footage. Because in my mind, I'm gonna eventually make get back to making videos and stuff again.
Right, I see. Yeah, yeah. You want to get some footage.
I don't think there's really that much point to record like 30 hours of me like failing on a puzzle level and then finally beating it. So there's no point. So I'm like, all
No,
right.
you have to ask yourself the question, who is going to watch this?
No, exactly.
So,
So yeah, so the last question you asked me last night, or I guess yesterday, was how many photo books do you own, or do you own any photo books? That's what you said, right?
yeah, do you own any? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I went to go count before. I have about like 26.
Okay. Oh, wow. So that makes you a collector then,
Well,
really?
that's the thing. I was surprised because it's kind of like, so you wanted to start it off by, we're both in agreement that there's a certain age that it's not acceptable for photo books or gravure, correct?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So
And that should be of age, whatever of age would be in a relative country, then I guess that's the legal requirement, right?
okay, so
So,
you see it as after a legal certain age, then it's fine.
well, as dictated by the law, whether my morality may question that is another thing. But if the law says you are now of age to vote or to drink or to get married or whatever else,
Right.
then arguably you're an adult, right? So you can pretty much make your own decisions.
Right, right, right. Okay. So no, I mean I agree with you, but the thing is, if the law in Japan is drastically different than, I think a lot of times people bring up the Japan didn't outlaw like possession of child pornography until like 2015. I see that like a lot. I've been seeing that a lot as I'm doing kind of like looking up stuff on the
Yeah,
internet.
me too. It's been quoted to me a couple of times on Twitter, and I don't really know the ins and outs of it. I don't know
Right.
whether it's as awful as it actually sounds.
Well, yeah,
Whether
because if you look it up too, if you look up the age of consent, what it'll officially say, like it says the age of consent in Japan is 13, and then people freak out. I was like 13, oh my gosh! But then if you read underneath it, it says but the absolute lowest you can set it is 13. But it says each prefecture decides on what the actual consent is per prefecture. So,
right,
so
and
I
I'm
don't think
guessing
it's like I don't actually think it's 13, right? I need to go
surely.
ask one of my Japanese friends, I guess, to go look this information up and try to figure out what exactly is per, what is the lowest per prefecture. I don't know
Yeah.
how it would be differentiate. So I don't
And
know
I'd
where.
be surprised. I'd actually be interested to know that answer because I wonder whether it's people would think, "What? Why are you asking me that?" Because nobody there, I don't think, would expect it to be, "Oh yeah, 13."
Yeah,
Nobody's going to answer that. I think everybody's going to say like 18 or 20 or whatever the coming of age is in Japan because I think it's fairly old for coming of age.
well, yeah, the coming of age, you can't drink or smoke until 20, I believe, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah, oh shoot, I don't want to misquote, but I, I thought it was 20. The weird thing,
I agree.
the weird thing about Japan is I don't know how it is in the UK, but like they rarely check ID in Japan. So I remember like when I was living, I was staying there for 3 months with my girlfriend, and we'd go out to eat, and she'd order like a drink, and she's fairly short. She's fairly short, and kind of at the time when we were dating, she was kind of like young looking. I don't know if she could pass as like a teenager, but I mean,
Hmm.
she, like in America, people would be like, "Oh my God, how old is she?" But over there they don't question it at all. And I remember we'd go out to get drinks, and she'd just order an alcohol, and I was always surprised. They're like, "Oh, they didn't ask for your ID?" And she's like, "No." Because in America, they always ask ID.
Yeah, and it would be equally as strict here.
Right. And so, I mean, there's times when I go out, I'm 36 years old. There's some times where they're just like, "Hey, can I see your ID real quick?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm 36. Here you go." It's
Yeah.
been long since I've been needed to be carded. But they'll ask me, and sometimes they'll ask for like movies too, like, "Oh, you have to be 18 to see this rated R movie." They'll ask all the time. I mean, you can get restaurants can get in big trouble for not checking. But in
Right.
Japan, like when she ordered, I was like, "They don't check ID." She's like, "No, we don't." And I was like, "Well then, well, what's going to stop somebody from ordering alcohol when they're not of age?" And her response, I promise you, this is her response. She was like, "David, we're Japanese. We don't do that."
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
That was her
Not
exact
surprised
response.
at
Is
all.
we
Yeah,
just don't do that kind of stuff.
no, that's the rule, and why would I break it? Because if I got found out, I'm fairly sure that would be quite embarrassing. And
Right, exactly. There's a
in my experience, people want to avoid that. There.
right. There's a very high level of like not wanting to look bad. Like it's like the social. It's important how you look among others.
Yeah,
And I think it's the same thing with like cigarettes too, because they have like cigarette dispensers. I don't think you have to like check ID. Like a kid could just go up to a cigarette dispenser, put the money in, and buy it. I don't think there's like an ID check for it or anything like that. I don't know how prevalent they are because I'm not a smoker. I don't really go around looking
no,
for.
me neither. I do seem to remember seeing them though,
Yeah,
and in theory, anybody could use it if they've got money. So
this just reminded me of the last conversation we had when we were talking about the panties dispensers and how we've never just seen them standing around on the store. Seen a
no,
bunch of cigarette dispensers, never seen any panty dispensers.
no, thankfully there were none that I passed.
Okay, so
So right, you've got 26 photo books, and I'm assuming they're of varying different idols. And
yes,
when I was looking up sort of how many who I would consider regular idols have done
uh huh,
anything beyond a regular photo book, I couldn't find that many, and I was finding people who were distinctly gravure models,
uh huh.
and that's not quite the same as being an idol, a singer,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
doing
yeah,
photo books.
yeah. That's that's the point you want to try to make?
Yeah, I think it's important to differentiate because you get that. Well, you get in Western media,
Uh huh.
you get idols making photo books, and they're
They're just all lumped
all
in together.
that's it. Everything's all lumped in, and that's the same with what we were almost talking about last time, which was junior idols.
Right,
They're all everything's just lumped in as one,
right.
and therefore the fans all get lumped in as one as being fans of everything, and
Sure,
there's
sure,
no
sure.
sort of split.
Well,
And I think that's very poor reporting.
right. Yeah. So
So your
Gravier's
photo book
yeah,
collection.
well, see, okay, so here's how with my photo books, this is probably I probably didn't start buying photo books till I was like 20. I want to say 24 or 25. I think there was a group that I really liked, and there was a couple members there was one member that I really liked. So
Hmm.
this was after the fact too. Her photo books have been out for a while, so it's not like I was following her day one and I bought them all. So they had been out for a while. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I like her, I support her, so I'm gonna go buy her photo books. And she had 3 of them, and so I went and bought all 3. I think the Hello Project members at the time, they tended to have like a lot more photo books. I think there's one that has like 7 photo books.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I want to say she has 7, but I mean she's long since graduated, and so yeah, I mean that was the first 3 I bought, and then I think I bought a couple more Hello Project, and then just I tend to follow a bunch of different idols, so I'm just like, oh, okay, well, so and so is gonna put out a photo book, great, and so, okay, great, and you just occasionally you'll buy one just to like kind of check it out and because curiosity, and then you want to kind of support them, and
Yeah, absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean there's definitely a line to be drawn because I've seen some idols go into the more racier like gravure stuff where they're like always just showing their butt. I mean, like not showing their butt, but like every pose is with them like directing their backside directly at the camera. And you're
Right.
just
I think there's some fairly stock poses that seem to be in that sort of genre,
uh-huh.
and that's what the models do. This modeling, and you will do these poses. And I think that's the same in photo books. It's all the same sort of slightly coy look towards the camera from shoulder up, and it's in every photo book I've ever seen. I'm sure it's in every one that you've got.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely. I think some of the stuff they try to the people who buy photo books. I think when they go to look at these, I think some of them are looking for something different. They're not looking for they don't want the plain generic photo book experience. Because I remember there was this one photo book that I bought, and the girl was like swimming in a pool, and like some of the photos were her of actually of her swimming, like she's doing the crawl, and then like the freestyle, and like her mouth is coming out to get a like air. It's like when I saw that picture, I was like, I mean that's hilarious. I liked it, but I also think it's like okay, well, it's kind of a weird photo to make.
I read something about the inspiration for idols to go and make photo books, because I wasn't quite sure why they would do it in such great numbers. Because, like you said, one's got 7, and if we look at somebody like Shiraishi Mai from Nogizaka 46, she's got plenty too.
Yeah, and the thing about Nogizaka though, it's very rare that they do bikini stuff, right?
They don't. As far as I know, it's not allowed.
Right,
they're allowed to do photo books, but I don't think they're allowed to do much else. And the photo books that they do, which seems to be a standard across the industry, is a glimpse of their life. It might be that they were on holiday. It might be.
Right. You're talking about
sort of,
in general.
In general,
it's always like so and so on holiday,
look.
Right?
Exactly. It's this behind the scenes look where a fan can get to know them in theory a little bit better,
right?
By getting this sort of come along on holiday with me. Look, I got this photo book and this is what I did.
Wait, is that weird though? You want to, because I think people, if people listen to it like the way you're saying, like come along with me, they're all automatically going to assume, oh, look, these fans just want to be their boyfriend. They want to go on vacation with them and imagine that's them.
I guess inevitably someone's going to feel that way if they're that deluded that they think that photo book is going to do that.
Right.
Fine. But I think regular people, if you buy that photo book, you're seeing your idol having fun and doing the things they do, and it gives you that slightly different idea of what they're actually like.
Sure.
No different to a handshake event,
right,
where you feel you might get a slight glimpse of what they're like in real life, apart from being an idol on stage.
Right.
And to me, that's what they're communicating with that book, and what the fan takes away from it, whether it's I wish I was their boyfriend and on holiday with them, or
well, could it be as simple as here's the simple thing for me. There's curiosity, right? I always there's some girls who don't do photo books.
Yeah.
And then I think people will go, I wonder how she looks in a swimsuit. Like
right.
I don't. Here's the thing. I don't think that's a bad thing for somebody to wonder. Like I don't.
No.
I don't think that automatically makes you some sort of like all I care about for women is sex, and I just view them as sexual objects. I don't think that's.
I don't think so either, and it's not unique to idols. If you look at let's say the attention that was drawn from leaked photographs of Scarlett Johansson. If you look at when that happened, the amount of people who wanted to see those photos that were stolen from her phone,
right,
it's no different for all of those people who wanted to see her in that way. So people want to see an idol in a bikini.
Here's two things that I would take differently from the Scarlett Johansson one. One is Scarlett Johansson doesn't look as young as some of these girls do in Japan, right? And I think that's one thing that makes people uncomfortable, is that the age thing. But then the other thing that I would take different is all those people looking up these Scarlett Johansson like pictures. Those pictures were private, right? They were private on her phone, not released to the public. Versus where like Photobooks and stuff, this is something that's it's all set in place, right? There's got to be permissions, there's got to be consent, that kind of thing.
Without a doubt. And my point was the desirability of wanting to see whatever famous actress or actor in a way that we wouldn't normally see them on stage or in a film. It's that same level of interest.
So you're talking about the interest as far as the Scarlett Johansson like photos.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I wonder what I want. You know, even though you know it's wrong to look at, you still kind of like the curiosity gets to you, and you kind
exactly because she's not doing it voluntarily, and all of a sudden you could see it if you wanted to without her permission. And clearly, a whole lot of people did want to see that.
Right.
And if we're talking about it not being unusual to want to see your favourite actor or actress in that state, then I don't think it's uncommon at all.
Well, yeah. Also, and I know this is going to be like sound crazy to some people, but I'll just say for me personally, then.
Okay.
I find women's swimwear very fascinating, especially. I know it's crazy. Like I'm a heterosexual male. You know, I've always had to kind of explain it. I'm like this very very tall Asian guy, like sports, but there's like some things about like the design behind women's swimwear, because like in America we don't have stuff like that. I have friends here in America that are like, hey David, next time you go back to Japan, can you get me a swimsuit from Japan? And I'm like, yeah, sure I can. Yeah, sure I can. I can't.
These guys asking you for
no, not guys, not guys. My girlfriends, you know.
Oh, okay.
My girlfriends, because like I feel like in Japan there can be cute. Mm-hmm. Like the cute is another form of women. Like I have a friend in Russia, and he's like, well, we don't have that cuteness here in Russia. Like there's not cute girls walking around just trying to be cute. They have to be like the Russian woman, and I'm, big Russian woman or sexy woman. But the cute is not another what's the word, demographic or marketing, or But in Japan, it's like more than half of the girls are just cute girls that can't really be sexy. They just can't. They're
right. Okay. Yeah.
They don't have the body type, or they don't have the features. So like, there's this whole market of like the frilly bikini. That again, my friends, they'll ask me like, hey, can you find some sort of frilly cute bikini for me? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'll go. I guess I'll go and take pictures, and then you can tell me which one you want or something, or the size. Because for me, it's all crazy because I have to. I'd rather them be there and like try them out and stuff.
I'm now just imagining you're the focus of some of those articles. A strange man caught photographing girls' bikinis.
I mean, yeah. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen those articles specifically, but hopefully it's not talking about me. Yeah, sorry.
So right, we totally got off track. So if we think about going back to these photo books and the way that it connects idol fans with idols,
right?
Which is what I think that they're designed to do. And I have to say, from my knowledge, it's not just female idols. Male idols make photo books too. And I think it does exactly the same.
Right, they're in magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just to showcase them and make them look good.
Yeah, prove their popularity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can order them signed and stuff like that. It's just another promotional tool.
Right.
Which, if you think about it, happens everywhere, just in different forms, whether it's a DVD, whether it's a signed picture, whatever. It's the same thing. It's just seen as this bizarre extension to an already bizarre industry, or certainly from some people.
It's very foreign already, and then this is just like adding on to it, right? More fuel to the fire. It's like, oh, how dare they go handshake these people, and then now they're making photo books too. Oh, it's got to be terrible. So my question, let's say the age is 20, right, or 18.
Yeah,
you're okay. I'm just asking your opinion here, not like.
Okay.
But you're okay. Above 18, you're fine, right?
Provided it's all consensual and they're happy to go and do this and they've not been forced into it, I don't see why it would be a problem.
Okay.
And we're especially where we're talking about this sort of thing, which is fairly innocent. It's not. There's no nudity in it. It's not gratuitous.
Well,
It's not exploitative, really. It's just
it's funny because people who don't follow this tend to have they just like we said earlier, they just paint it with a broad stroke. But like if you've followed this for a while, you'll notice, like, especially with AKB, I noticed that the younger girl, like when they're starting off, and these are not photo books, they're just like, oh, we're gonna put them in a magazine spread or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily bikinis, but like, oh, they're just wearing like
It'll be school uniforms.
yeah, or like pajamas or stuff that's kind of like cutesy, and I don't want to say revealing, but I mean it's definitely not like a t-shirt and jeans or something. But
No.
but you'll notice, like, anyone under like 16, they're always, how do you say this? They don't wear revealing clothes. Like, for instance, there's no cut there's no low cut neckline. They don't show any like cleavage or anything. They'll always wear like stuff that's not as revealing. Yeah, and then the ones that are above 16 and above, then they're more okay to do that. I mean, I think that's a conscious choice by whoever's picking out the outfits or taking the pictures or...
Sure. I mean, there must be, because this is the point for me, is I've never encountered these things when I was in Japan. Even then I was going to stores to find idle goods. I didn't see them there. And it's not something that I go out of my way to find while I'm here.
Right.
And it's not something you just sort of stumble across. It doesn't just turn up.
Right.
So I'm never quite sure of what it is really all about. And when I see particularly an article that we both read in a certain UK newspaper, everybody's lumped together in that, painted with broad strokes.
Sure.
I find it very difficult to get around that because I think, well, I haven't seen any of this to know what they're doing.
Sure. There is definitely, I mean, like, if you're going to these major bookstores and like walking in, you're not like walking into a Barnes and Noble, like their equivalent of a Barnes and Noble. You're not walking in there and seeing some of this weird stuff. There are those like under 15 and under 13 like magazines and DVDs and stuff.
Sure. Well, we've seen that they apparently exist.
No, they definitely exist, and I've been into these places, and it's kind of like...
Really?
They're kind of like, yeah, they're in Akihabara. If you go to Akihabara...
They're there if you look for them.
And if you go into the alleys, you can find them. The absolutely weird thing is... okay, well, actually not weird, but terrible. I feel like this is the terrible thing is... It's not like these 13 or 15-year-old girls are deciding this on their own, right?
No.
There's got to be parental consent before this happens. So then that makes you think, like, what are these parents? Why are they allowing this? Or why do they think this okay? Are they exploiting the kids? Like, okay, because I remember there was a couple like really famous child stars here in America, and when they were young, they were making like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and it became to the point where their parents are tempted because maybe they've never had that much money in their life. And all of a sudden, their kid is making more money than they ever dreamed of. So they just basically use the kid, and all the money that the kid is making, they're just spending as quickly as the kid can make it. And they're basically saving nothing for the kid. And then it gets to a point where like it's very high profile, like, oh, well, the kid is suing their parents, and the kid is like 15 years old now, and suing their parents because they just blew all their money.
Right.
Right, it's terrible. It's terrible, but like parents like that exist, and
and there's two sides to that as well. There's not just the parents perhaps pushing kids into it, but there's also a particular emphasis on becoming famous and earning your fortune and becoming a star, far more so today than there ever was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. Just because there's that so much more accessibility, you have are much easier to become well known today than it ever was before. And kids, I think, particularly even younger than 13 or whatever, many will dream of doing that. And in Japan, I guess an idol is a very good way of doing that. So kids will not mind initially being put into a situation that they don't fully understand because they think they're going to become famous.
Right.
And that the parent, the pushy parent behind that, that's half of the problem, is because the kid doesn't
Right. No,
necessarily understand.
absolutely. That's one thing that never gets talked about because when you go, I have friends who live in Japan and they go to shows they follow a group, they go to shows all the time. What ends up happening? They end up meeting like the idol's parents because
Right.
I wish I could do some sort of study and maybe I will be able to one day, but I feel like there's a link to how if the parent comes out to the shows and stuff, you tend to find that idol is a little bit more like grounded and a little bit more stable as far as their mindset or their family life and everything. I think that's an important part of making sure like the idol's career doesn't spiral out of control because of
Yeah.
for whatever various factors. Because I mean, who else can influence you more than your own family?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
if they're not
Absolutely.
around, if they're just like letting you run, oh, just go, yeah, have a good one, and you're off hanging off with these whoever it is at these events, it's definitely not a good situation for you, especially if you're not that mature.
So those sort of events that your friends go to,
Uh
are
huh.
we talking that's junior idol level, which I think is what, 13 or below as an idol?
My friends, they follow mostly. I mean, it's just regular idols and stuff.
Right, okay.
I
Because
actually
regular to me is like 20 plus half the time, even though they might not look 20 plus, they are.
so that's kind of a question then. Do you have any problem with like this 16-year-old idols or 15-year-old, 16, 17, that kind of thing?
When you say problem, it's listen, it's not something that I'm going to be one of those weird idol fans who actually quite likes the music.
Uh huh.
So I tend to follow idols who I think sing well or the music is good.
Right.
It's not just about what they look like.
Right.
It's actually about the music.
For actual idol fans, I don't think the age is so much of something that they think about. Like they just like,
No,
hey, I like this idol. They're funny. Oh, she happens to be 15. So there's no like, oh, okay, well she's 15 now. I can't follow her because they're like, oh, well, I like the group. I like the songs.
it might make me take a step back
Hmm.
just because I don't know how I feel about that. I think that there's
Sure.
a degree of sort of I'm not quite sure if I could be a fan, as in, I'm going to go to the concerts live, I'm going to do the handshake events, whatever, whatever, whatever.
Right.
I think that is a bit strange.
Right. There's definitely a.
Well, I was going to say that not everybody who does go to those things is going to be weird and out there sort of
Right.
um, looking at them in a very, very disturbing manner. Not everybody is going to be doing that. Some people will actually be there thinking, this idol is going to be a huge star, and I'm happy to be able to follow them when they're 16 and
And
when they're
growing.
25, they're going to be the equivalent of AK-48.
Right.
And I
I
was
mean,
there at
there's
the
there's
beginning.
a bit of that putting like betting on them that they're going to be big or something.
Right. And I have a feeling that's a bit of a thing for really serious idol fans. They want to be there at the beginning
No,
because
I mean
they
absolutely.
get that relationship sort of out of the gate.
Yeah, the idols is always about like watching them progress and from
Mm,
them being a not so very good, very unpolished entity to becoming
yeah.
this great superstar. It's funny because I heard somebody talk about this as far as like with male idols.
Mm,
It's kind of different but the same. Like with male idols, there were like a bunch of like kind of mom aged women who are following these male idols and watching them grow up, and they're like, oh, I see, they're kind of like my son, or I like watch them grow up and I feel like attached to them in that way. I think
right.
it's very hard because I think it's a harder sell to convince people that that's what guys are doing with these girls, because they're like, oh, look, this 40-year-old guy, why would he ever want to follow this 15-year-old girl? It's got to be about sex or lust.
That's it. And when you boil it down to the facts and you have that basic sort of this girl is 15 or whatever, this
Right.
guy is 40 or whatever,
Hmm.
and he stands. This is what I really hated about about that Daily Mail article is it said these men stand in dark rooms watching girls perform on stage, and you think if you're going to phrase it like that, of course it sounds hateful. It sounds horrible, and no one in their right mind would want to be part of it.
Sure.
But if you do it like we did, and we're sort of explaining potentially they aren't all creepy maniacs, then there's another way to look at it. If you talk about it sensibly, then I think that you can appreciate that it's not all just every idol fan is that person standing there being extremely creepy.
Yeah, just I have a
But
lot. There's a lot of weird, different experiences. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was, you asked me whether I thought that that was a good thing that they were under that age, and I have to say I don't think it is.
Good thing?
But there's not much you can do about it.
You're talking
if
about
it's
like 16, 17, I think.
yeah.
You
well,
would prefer that everybody's above the age.
just yeah.
Hmm. I don't disagree with
There's not
that.
much
I
you
mean,
can do about it either way, particularly if it's consensual. If their parents are putting them into that stage, and there's not much you can do about guys going there to watch it and girls going there to watch it. It's not illegal on either side. It's not something that can be sort of banned just because some people might read an objectionable side to it.
well, see,
Right?
here's the thing. I'm okay with a strict rule. If you're saying like, okay, under a certain age you can't be an idol, okay, then above it, but then I would argue like, it's the same thing with like TV, right? You have like they need children to portray children in shows, right?
Oh.
And I think it's pretty common that child stars who start their careers when they're really young, they end up having like terrible lives, or not terrible lives, but they always have like some sort of issues when they're growing up.
There's some wilderness years. There's some years where their things go a bit wrong because they had too much too soon.
Right. It's so much to deal with when you're that age.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing. If that's the case, like I'm totally fine. Let's just cut it off below a certain age. You just can't be a star. Like, do we really need kids portraying kids that bad in shows? I mean, it's just all for the sake of entertainment, right?
Yeah, but you can't. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. If you can look up studies and you say like 70% of kids who are child stars, they'll end up with their lives in shambles by because like, okay, for instance, like, remember that kid who was in episode 1 of Star Wars, and it's Anakin Skywalker, young Anakin Skywalker, and like he was built up to be this great, like he was going to be he's going to be, I'm sure at one point he thought his career was going to be like take off and he was going to be like a superstar. From everything I've read, I think he doesn't want anything to like. He hates it when anybody brings up Star Wars with him, and like he just, I'm sure it's a lot to overcome, especially like since a lot of hate is directed probably towards him because of that movie not being good. I think there's people like, oh, he's such a terrible actor. He did a terrible job acting, and it's like he was like what 14, 13 years old. It's terrible. Yeah. He has to deal with that.
Yeah.
So
who would want to be a star?
Right. For me, if you want to just ban it all out completely altogether, I'm totally fine with that too. But I think the reason why I have less of a problem with like a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old, let's say the age of consent is 18, because that's what it is in America, right?
Yeah, same.
18. We're kind of in agreement. Like, look, once they're 18, they're their own person. You have to draw the line somewhere, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's impossible because I know people who are like 20, 25, even 30 years old who they're not that mature still. They still act like ridiculous people. But I mean, you got to draw the line somewhere. So, okay, 18 is the line, right?
Sounds good.
I think why I'm more okay with like 15, 16, 17 is because for two reasons. One, I mean, like we said, it's watching the development of these people. Like, you kind of want to watch them grow up. Like, when you see them as a kid, you're like, oh, look, hey, it's so funny. And then all of a sudden, they're like, you can obviously tell they're a woman now. Or like they're reaching womanhood. And I think that transformation is interesting for people. Because I remember there was
100%. Yeah.
There was so many funny shows where it was like this one idol, and they're like, okay, now do your sexy voice. And she's like, okay, cool. And then does the most pathetic sexy voice you could ever imagine, and everybody's just laughing like, come on. I think there's like humor to that.
There is, yeah. One thing that I'm thinking of while you're talking about this is I've watched over the last couple of months one of the Nogizaka 46 TV shows, and when one of the members started out, Asuka Saito, she was 13 when she joined the group.
Sure.
And now she's 20 something.
Right.
And you did see the development of her from being somebody who was coming into a big name group with obviously no experience, to becoming center and becoming sort of this very pivotal member of the group.
Right. She's just like an awkward kid, and then
that's it, and it was cool.
It's really, really cool. Yeah, absolutely. And then to be,
but
like you said,
it was sexual, and I think that's really difficult for some people to get,
Right.
and I don't quite understand why.
Yeah, and for you to be there, like, oh, I was there. I remember when she came in when she was 13, and now look at her now. I was there since the beginning. I think there's, like you said earlier, there's some of that too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's a good to point out with Nogizaka specifically. Like we said earlier, they don't do the bikini and stuff, or very rarely. I think they've done like one group.
oh maybe, yeah,
But because the whole point of Nogizaka was kind of so like AKB did the Gravure, the bikini photo shoots. Nogizaka was more targeted towards like female fans, like young, like high school female fans. They look at them as like fashion or like role models, kind of.
right. I read a stat. Shiraishi Mai's last photo book or something, 190,000 sales or something ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
And a high percentage of that was girls. It
Right.
wasn't guys, because she's the face of sort of major makeup and fashion brands in Japan.
Right.
It's not just guys. It's actually, she's a model.
Okay, so this goes into a different point too. Is like there are female fans, and the female fans, why you would think, oh, why would they like this girl group? It's got to be because this is something I've asked. I have a couple like lesbian friends, and they're Idol fans, and they're pretty hardcore. And
Right.
I've always just been like, okay, well, if it's all about sexual stuff, is this why these lesbians are into this? Because they see these girls as potential girlfriends? And I'll ask them this, and they're like, no. Everybody finds their own reason why they get into it. Maybe it's like the fashion, or maybe it's the personality, the humor, and stuff like that. So, I had a point, and I lost it in the middle of this. What was I saying?
It's quite a difficult subject to talk about, isn't it? There's so much depth to it, and there's a lot of sort of areas that I think people struggle with, particularly if they're new to the industry or new to idols or new to Japanese culture. And it's very difficult to make sure you cover all of the points.
What? Right, exactly. There's a lot of points to cover. It's
There
not,
really
it's not a
are.
straight, like, simple, here's the reason why, there you go.
No, and it's difficult for us as people who don't live in Japan to actually get all of the nuances of this,
And
because
that's
it is different.
That's a very, very good point too, because, yeah, when you don't live there, when you didn't grow up in there, it's also very different. So it reminds me, like when I was growing up here in America, my parents are Chinese, and they're first generation, so they had just come from Taiwan to here, and
Right.
growing up all my life, they were always like, oh, David, don't be American, okay? Don't be one of those typical Americans. All you want to do is just eat hamburgers and drink beer and watch football. Don't be, and so all my life I got that from them growing up, and I remember just I was like, that's not what they do. Like I go to my friend's house,
Right.
they're not all watching football. They're not all drinking beers all day.
Yeah.
But like that's from their experience. That's what they saw, and so that's what they automatically assumed. And I feel like it's the reverse when you see Americans talk about idols in the same way. They
Yeah.
just automatically assume that it's all.
Well, we have to get our information from somewhere, right? And we either
Right.
get it from mainstream entertainment, or we get it from scandalous articles published online or in newspapers that
That really want to get your view.
sensationalized.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean that's the whole thing. You can almost not believe all this stuff on the internet because, I mean, I don't even know how you can trust the internet ever because it's life. Life and humans work on a very like incentive based, right? They're not gonna. It's all about incentives. It's a terrible story. I don't know if I don't know if I can tie this in relevantly, but I don't know if it's China or Taiwan. I think it's Taiwan. So there was a story about a guy who was driving and he hit a girl with his car, right? And they have this on camera, and he's sitting there and he's thinking about it. And then what does he do? He reverses over her and runs her over again,
I seem to remember something.
and then drives away. And you think, oh my God, how could a person do that? Like, what kind of no conscience person, like, what kind of evil person does that? And they asked him afterwards. They're like, how could you do that? And he's like, in the law, I think the law in Taiwan was something like, if you hit her and she's like you have to pay all her medical bills, right?
Right.
But if she doesn't survive, then you don't have the medical bills. So it was like, for him, it made more sense for him to run her over again and make sure that she was dead, because otherwise he was going to spend the rest of his life probably paying off her medical bills.
I mean, that's cold wherever
No,
you
it's
come
absolutely,
from.
absolutely terrible, terrible story. But the incentive
But
is
I know the point you're making. It's that.
with online stuff. I'm saying with online, like, there's no reason why they wouldn't want to make, because if their livelihood is based upon getting views and trying to get people to read their articles, it makes more sense for them to write the most outlandish, most even almost misleading articles they can, because controversy is going to get a lot more views than rationality. Is that the word?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's terrible, because I see these articles all the time, and I'm like, why do they have to write it like that? Why do they, just take such a drastic stance on something because it makes sense for them to?
It does, but I think part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you is because of those articles, and because of the way that it's portrayed in the press,
right?
Occasionally, and because it's scandalous, it gets a lot of attention.
Right.
I feel as a regular Idol fan, I get judged because of that, and I don't like people to think that every Idol fan is like that, and that I'm like that just purely because they don't understand it,
right?
Or are often only taking their information from a headline and not perhaps even reading the entire article. And I feel it's important, as people who are interested in the industry, as Idol fans, we should be saying, there's a little bit you're not getting here. And
Sure. There's always two sides, right? The one side is these press people writing these articles portraying us in a certain way. And I also think the other side is, like, maybe us as fans not doing such a great job to kind of, like, because largely, in fact, there's some people who just don't like confrontation, right? Or they just, hey, let me just do my thing, leave me, like, I'm not doing anything wrong, let me to do my thing, and I don't want to, like, stir up problems.
No, I think that's the way it should be. I certainly don't.
That's absolutely great, but I think there could be more to be done as far as, like, setting a good example, letting people see, like, hey, these fans are normal people too.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's been a couple times when I've gone to shows, and Idol fans can kind of be very, like, in their own group, and they kind of just don't branch out. But I've seen, like, Idol fans, when I go to, like, these shows, when a group comes over, I'll see, like, people, like, you can tell who doesn't really understand it. And it's important, I think, for fans to kind of, like, interact with those people who aren't familiar with it, and kind of, familiarize them and kind of, like, make them more comfortable.
Yeah, and a lot of enjoyment comes from that.
Yeah.
If you're new to it, and particularly if it's the first time you've been to a concert or first time you've been to see a particular group, there's so much interaction from an audience perspective. If you don't know that, or you don't know all of the songs, the experience you have is much less than it would be if you actually knew what to do and you followed everybody else, and everybody else was very inclusive. And I think
no, absolutely.
Idol fans are fairly inclusive anyway, certainly in my experience.
Yeah, but it's a big deal. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people are kind of hesitant to go to these shows. If you're in Japan, right? Let's say it's your first time in Japan, you've never been to Japan. Like, first of all, how do you even go to a show? You don't even know.
That's a story, and that's a podcast in itself, right? It's how to get to
how to get to it. Where is it? When is it going on? You're having a hard enough time. Yeah, you're having hard enough time traveling around in this foreign country, and then there's also this intimidation of, like, okay, well, I'm gonna go, and, like, what's gonna happen? And again, I remember there was a friend of mine, a Korean friend, and I remember I was like, oh, I'd love to. Her boyfriend was, like, one of my best friends, and so I was like, hey, I'd love to take y'all out to a show. I'd be walk you around Japan, show you around, and then take you to a show. And she was like, I don't know, David, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know if it's safe. I mean, what's going to happen when I go to the show? Like, I think she had it in her mind, like, it was going to be a room full of guys. She was going to walk in, and all these guys were all of a sudden going to turn around and be like, oh, woman, there's a girl in the show. And they're all gonna, like, all of a sudden, all of them were going to have impure thoughts, and her safety was going to come into question. And I was like, dude, I wouldn't take you to a place if it wasn't safe, And Japan is not like this lawless country where just there's a woman on the street and all the guys are gonna just jump on you or something. What do you even? Why do you have that picture painted in your mind?
But how awful that she did, and
Right, and this is one
I
of my
wonder
best
how
friends.
many people have that exact same thought.
Yeah.
And if I think about when I went to those shows, it was slightly in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, what is it really going to be like? Are those stories true?
Right.
Of course, they're not, but it's there in my mind, and I was a fan.
Yeah.
So imagine somebody who's not thinking, well, like you say, this is going to be this sexual free-for-all, and that's it. I'm going to go in there, and who knows what's going to happen.
Exactly. And you know what? That's the point I wanted to make. Sorry. I don't know if I can go back to this. Maybe I can cut it around. But remember we were talking about Nogizaka and how, like, Nogizaka is kind of geared towards women. And then, like, you have, like, AKB kind of geared towards more male audiences with the bikinis and stuff, where they're more willing
I'd
to do
say
bikini.
Nogizaka is much more open as to who their fans are,
Right.
male and female, I think, more so than any other
So
48 or 46.
the point I was trying to make is that I think there are a lot of female fans, but what attracts them to the fandom is different from what attracts men. So, like, for instance, going to, like, these live shows, right? And jumping around and screaming and getting very passionate. I think there's a very kind of, like, what is it? Like, chaotic tribal energy that I think men very, like, gravitate towards that. It's kind of like, you know, like playing sports or like jumping around like elbow to elbow. I don't know what that energy is. I think it speaks to me a lot, which is why I love going to shows.
Yeah.
But I don't see female fans as interested in jumping. There are female fans that do. I've been like in mosh pits where we're all jumping around. There's a girl and she's running into everybody. But I don't think that's as common with female fans. So
No, I didn't see it as much.
but
Perhaps towards the end of some of the shows when it was really, when the energy was sort of at its maximum.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I did see that. But like you say, it's fairly rare.
Yeah, so my point is, like, I think that's why, I mean, it's terrible because when a lot of these outlets go and report on it, they go and shoot the film and they see like this, oh, it's all these guys, it's a room full of guys. It's just, I don't know, it's just what happens. I think guys are more interested in going to shows and jumping around and just the calls. It's like screaming. It's this dumbest thing. The calls, screaming out, like doing the cheers and stuff. It's the dumbest thing. But for some reason, it just totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that it makes sense to you. It didn't for me as a British guy. When you go to these things, I'm typically British and fairly restrained. When I go to these places, I find it difficult to sort of instantly get into it, and I'm not standing at the front waving my glow stick and doing the chants. It's not me. Well, but by the end, I wanted to. I actually, because you feel that energy and because the idols on stage, they want you to be part of it.
Right. It's your way of being participating in the show. It's like you're part of the show. Yeah, because I just remember.
I've never seen that.
I just remember being when I was like the shy Asian kid. And I remember going to like my favorite bands in America, and I'd go to the concerts, and everybody would be jumping up and down and being all crazy. And I liked the band, and I knew the songs, but there was just this like timidness that I just couldn't let myself go enough to jump around. I mean, I've seen my favorite bands in Japan too, and it's just not the same because I don't know, it just lacks this kind of thing that lets me let go of that self-consciousness. But like at idol concerts, for some reason I've been able to like get over it. People always think like, oh, David's this, when they meet me, he's a really outgoing person and he really gets along, he talks to strangers. But like, I haven't always been like this. I've always been like, I was a typical kind of shy Asian kid growing up, and I was kind of chunky too, so that didn't help.
I wonder if that experience of sort of regular concerts and idol concerts, of feeling like you want to get involved, is actually a talent on the girls' part or the guys' part, because that connection with the audience is often a lot closer.
Right.
I think they encourage you to get involved a lot more than perhaps a large concert, a little concert, regardless of who's singing or what sort of genre it is. Perhaps there is more encouragement of getting involved.
Well, definitely, I think that's one of the points with idols that, again, is lost, is the whole, like, there's a lot of times when I read stories and people are like, oh, well, they're very welcoming, right? That's why I like coming, is because there's this thing in Japan where, social interaction is not super common. Like, you don't walk around just talking to people in Japan. You kind of mind your own business and you do your own thing. And so, like, I think a lot of people are starving for that interaction with somebody. And as weird as it is, there's no shyness with there's not supposed to be this shyness with idols, right? Because I feel like there's this, because you've paid for it, you're kind of like, oh, well, it's not weird. Like, in America, they're going to see it as very weird because it's like, why are you paying to talk to somebody? But in Japan, I feel like it's because you've paid, it's like, okay, it's not this weird conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. But I've also seen at handshake and greeting events that I've been to, and the few that I have been, people are still really shy.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
No, absolutely.
It's looking down at the ground and the idol is doing the speaking and they're sort of nodding in agreement, and it's a very simple, they're genuinely shy and embarrassed, yet they still want to do it. And that's what made me smile, is they were overcoming that social awkwardness.
Right.
And still going up there to somebody who they respected or they felt differently towards.
Right.
But they were actually doing it, and I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a couple stories, two stories. One, I remember I took a friend and I was like, hey, I thought they were really enjoying the show. I thought they were going to go take a picture. So I was like, oh yeah, hey, you're going to go take a picture? I'll pay for you. I'll pay for you. Go get it. And he's like, oh no, I don't know about it. And I was like, you don't want to meet her? It's like, no, it's okay. That's okay. And I was just like, why is he all of a sudden not wanting to go all of a sudden? I was like, well, what if I take a picture with you? Like, if you and me go to meet her together, would you do it? He's like, yeah. Okay, yeah, definitely. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's why. Because I don't know. There was probably a time when it was super weird for me, or super awkward for me, but I think at this point I've gotten over it. And I forget that, like, sometimes people just, it's a very difficult hurdle to get over, but once you get over it, I think it becomes a lot more easy.
Once you've done it, you realise actually nothing terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
And for me, I was nervous almost in the same way, where I was thinking, I don't know if I want to do this. But then I thought, well, you know what? When I go home, I'm never going to have that chance.
No,
never again. So, get over it and get up there and do this, because I'm going to regret it more if I don't.
It's a really great feeling. It sucks because there's times when you fail. You'll want to do something, but you just can't. But it's a really great feeling when you fail, and then finally you get over it, and you, even as something as simple as, hey, I'm just going to go meet this performance person or this performance artist.
It's even worse when your Japanese isn't necessarily very good and mine's fairly basic, and I try to do my best and I still fall over all of my words trying to get them out.
And that's a big deal too, right? I think that's something that a lot of fans have difficulty. I had a guy on the show recently and he was just like, he speaks Japanese okay, but like the first time he went to go meet an idol, he was like, I didn't say a word. I was like, no. He's like, couldn't get the words out of my mouth. I just kind of like smiled and waved, and that was it. And I was like, that's hilarious. That's great. It's fine.
The first time, this was in the UK, the first time I met an idol, first ever, and it was, it might have been Honey Spice, but I knew that I wanted to say Hajime Mashite.
Yeah.
And I could not get past Hajime. And it was just sort of, and she actually completed the word for me. And I was just mortified. It was so terrible.
But here's the funny thing. So can I ask you, how old were you when that was a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, it would have been 4 years ago. Yeah. So I would have been 40.
Okay, you were 40 and she was?
Oh, like half that.
So she was like 20 years old, right?
I guess. Yeah, so, I don't know, but I guess thereabouts, yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, it's funny because why? Like, why are you nervous meeting this 20-year-old girl?
Because they're famous. To me, they were a star. They had just been on stage. I enjoyed their music, and I thought, I'm going to, man up and go and stand in the queue and do the handshake and get my CD signed.
No, but I mean, I absolutely love that still, but I'm just, it's a curious thing. Like, why? Why as a, Like for me, same thing. I'm like a 30-year-old guy. You meet these girls. It's funny because sometimes I feel like it was somebody like Yamamoto Sayaka. I think she's like 20 something now, 22. I've never met her in my life, but if I went to go meet her, I would probably be nervous as hell. And I don't understand why, because I'm like 30 something years old. Like with some idols, I'm like, look, I'm 30 and they're 20 years old. I have so much more life experience. Why do I have to be nervous meeting this person? But with somebody like Yamamoto Sayaka, I feel like she's been doing this since she was like 15 or 16. She was in a band. She wrote all her songs. She performed in front of all these people. Now she's like in AKB or NMB, and she's like this huge star. Like I feel like there's this feeling of like she's done so much with her life. Like comparatively, I feel like out of place. So I can imagine going to meet her and being like, oh gosh, I'm going to be nervous. What could I even say to this person? Like,
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was just I want to make a good impression.
yeah.
And ultimately, I'm queuing up to see that person and say, "Hi, I really liked your music. I thought it was really good." Blah 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 blah. Whatever. I don't want to come across as sort of standing there and they think, "Well, why on earth did you bother queuing up if you're not going to say anything?" Or if you're not going to offer something to this side of the conversation.
It's a lot of internal battle, right? It's you making like your mind just going out of control and being like, oh my gosh, and like every little thing being magnified. Like, oh, I waited 2 seconds, I haven't said anything yet. Oh shit. And just I love it. I just love like that hurdle and you trying to get over it. It reminds me of a lot. You know how many Japanese fans I've met like overseas. Like, so every time I go to a show, whether it be in like Mexico or Los Angeles or New York, there's always some random Japanese fan that made the trip. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, I'll look for them specifically. I'm like, okay, he's the Japanese guy. And I'll go and I'll introduce myself like, hey, how are you doing? Where are you from? And he's like, oh, I'm from so-and-so. I was like, have you ever been to America before? No. And I'm like, okay, so this is your first time in America? You just came to America just to see this idol? He's like, yep. Like, and some of them have some experience with the English language and some of them not so much.
Yeah.
And I'm always so like amazed by these people who make this trip to this foreign country that they have no experience. They have to travel around. Usually they're by themselves. So it's not like they're going with their friend and they're able to like, lean on somebody else. It's this trek, this adventure into this foreign land on their own because of whatever idol that they're following. They feel like they have to like go support them and represent them in this other country. I love it. I love it when I hear stories about them doing stuff like that.
Yeah, me too. I agree. And I'd imagine the story that they have to tell once they've done it to make that decision and say, I'm going abroad to see this. And, that turns into a whole experience. I mean, ultimately, that's what I did.
Right.
Only in reverse. I just happened to go to Japan and see idols that I really liked. It wasn't my express reason for going, but it was certainly a part of it. So I was that guy. I did travel the other side of the world and saw groups that I'd never see here. So it's the story that you have when you come back, and that experience I don't think will ever leave.
So so that's a good point too. What's the quote? There's a quote like something like your life ends up being more fulfilling if you spend money on experiences versus you spend money on like actual physical goods.
Right.
Like if you buy a TV, it's great, but I mean, it's just a TV versus you spending your money to go to Japan and go see a group. And there's a lot of emphasis on like goods in idols and like buying stuff and CDs and DVDs and photo books and all that stuff. But ultimately what you're paying for is the experience, right? Is to experience something that you may not experience anywhere else.
Yeah, and the experience won't be the same anywhere else. It'll be close,
right? But
it won't be the same.
Yeah, and so I think that's why. Yeah, I mean that's why a lot of people get into it, is because there's always a new experience. I find there's this arc of an idol fan's like life cycle, right? And it's different. It's not. It doesn't work for everybody. It's like slightly tweaked depending on the person. But there's always this like discovery in this group, and then getting into them, and then like going out of your comfort zone, doing other things, and then the life cycle of the group like wanes, and then you have to find the next challenge if you want to keep in this fandom. It'll be the next challenge, and you have to always constantly find this next challenge. And part of it is also like the group itself. The group finds a challenge, they overcome it, but then if they keep repeating that same challenge, people lose interest. So part of the reason why like AKB was such a phenomenon and fascinating is because they were always finding new challenges, and everybody was kind of along for the ride. And their next big challenge, oh, okay, we're going to sell CDs, and now we're going to be acting in TV shows, and now we're going to be doing this, and it was really interesting to be along for that and see all that like kind of unfold in front of your eyes.
Absolutely, and they're unique too because of the amount of turnaround of people within that group, which smaller groups don't really have that luxury. They might have one turnaround every couple of years, but it's rare that you have 2 or 3 or 4 different groups of future members all coming up behind the current members. So there's always that turnaround.
Right.
And that's also really, that makes them special because they've always got that level of attraction of something new. Right. Which smaller groups don't have the luxury of.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So Photobooks, we were talking about. Is there anything else you want to? I don't know. Did we need to like distinguish between like gravure and there? Okay, so there was a market in Japan originally, which was strictly gravure, right? There were gravure idols. These were like idols. These were women who were more womanly looking. They were always very like busty and like more adult looking, and there was this specific like niche market that they had cut out, like specifically kind of a little bit on more like provocative, more adult side photo books. And I remember, who did I talk to, but they said that ever since AKB came along, they kind of like devoured that section of the market to where these gravure idols don't kind of exist anymore.
Right. I mean, I don't know. To me, it was always the split of either like a swimsuit model, someone who is a model. Right. They're going out specifically to do modeling. They're not a singer and then a model. They're not an actress and a model. They're a model. Right. And they choose to do swimsuit stuff, which tends to be like Sports Illustrated style photo shoots that goes in gravure magazines or books or whatever. And I don't know whether there was a specific body type. It's not really my area of expertise, if I'm absolutely honest. But there is a distinction between all of those things. I don't know how common it is anymore, even, like you say.
As far as the swimsuit kind of model?
Yeah, whether it's diluted now to being a bit of something for everybody. Because if AKB came along and did it too, then that all of a sudden opened up that market from what was, probably quite niche to becoming really quite mainstream. Right.
I mean, because definitely there's this, from a marketing standpoint, it makes sense, right? If you're a singer and you can find another avenue to kind of like forward your career, if you're willing to do that, then more power to you, just putting yourself out there more. It's funny because, here's an example. There was an idol that I used to follow, and she's rather well endowed, very like top heavy in his ridiculous proportions, right? And she was an idol, and she would dance around. And I remember the exact moment she had started doing some of these photo shoots already, these kind of racier photo shoots. And there was a moment when I saw her that I was like, she's not going to be an idol very long anymore. Right. Because you could see that being an idol, she had to like perform all the time. She had to be at the theater. She had to be at this, at the venues. She had to be there. She had to and like, she was in a group with a bunch of other members, and all the other members were really cute members. So all the members' lines were always full, and people were always in line to go meet the other members. And hers was kind of like short, and then she was kind of done. And I remember I was at a show, and I was looking at all the other girls were like busy doing their thing, and she was just standing there kind of like, And I was, at that moment, I was like, she's not going to be an idol very long, because the effort requiring her having to be there all the time and practice it, and like literally performing like 5 times a week or so, you could see that she wasn't getting like the return on her effort. So, a couple months later, she was like, okay, I'm not doing the idol thing anymore. And she just went strictly magazine and photo shoots and all that stuff. And that's pretty much all she does now, because in her mind, like, okay, if I go to the studio, like an 8-hour shoot or something like that, and then I'm done for like the week, maybe.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a completely different work schedule, and
it is. But let's not treat that as any different business decision to what a Western model would choose, because that also changes the direction of your career. It does make you less likely to get certain work in the future,
Right.
because it is a certain direction of career.
Sure.
It's not like, oh, well, I can do that and then I can do anything, because
Right.
it kind of isn't. You're still pushing the boundaries of societal norms. So you are making a conscious decision to do something that might change your career in the future. Right?
Where are you saying, like, whereas like idols, you're still kind of open to everything?
I think so, yeah, because it gives it's more accepted. It's more regular.
Right.
You're not. There's no pictures of you out there on the internet in putting your butt in the air like we're talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's
there's certain directions of your career that's not going to open up in the future. If you want to stop being an idol and you want to go and be a teacher, that might not be quite so easy if you've done that sort of photo shoot before. It is kind of the same anywhere in the world.
No, that's sure. That's absolutely true. Because idols is just kind of this like training session. Like your career path can go any direction, so you're just kind of doing the basics. It's like the core classes in college, right? You're just taking your core classes and not like specializing in anything yet.
And that's not uncommon either, is it? That when idols graduate, they stop being an idol sometimes. They don't go on to be an entertainer. They go into a regular job. Yeah,
more often than not, they probably don't go into the entertainment industry. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's I'm okay with it because it's always like when you're young at that age, you don't really know what you want, and good on them for just chasing after something, and then if they realize that's not what they want to do, okay, then change directions and go do something else.
Yeah, and it looks like monstrously hard work from what I've seen.
Yeah,
it's not as if they're just having a little bit of fun. It's serious.
No, sure. I think there's a lot of people who discredit idols because they're not very talented. Oh, they're not good singers. They're not good dancers. There's all this other stuff. But I mean, it's completely wrong because the work, even if they're not the best singers, it doesn't matter. What they do half the time is way harder than anybody else can imagine what it must be like, especially at formative years, to get up on stage and do that. Yeah, there's a lot of there's some sort of talent involved. It might not be something specifically that you can point your finger at, but so I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with Becky Cruel? I guess she's not Becky Cruel anymore. She's Becky.
Yeah, I know her name. I think we follow each other on Twitter. I know who she is. Yeah.
Right. I had talked to her once because she had kind of gotten into this whole like whirlwind of like all of a sudden I'm a YouTube popular, right? Or there was a very like she had a look that like for some reason got really popular in Japan, right? And I talked to her. She told me about the story about how she just was contacted and then was in this whirlwind of a like. I'm going to Japan. I'm going to do commercials in Japan. I got to make these appearances in Japan. Like all of a sudden, this fandom of like making music, and she got a lot of hate from people on the internet.
Of course,
partially because why is she the one who gets all these opportunities?
Right.
And there's a lot of people talking about, oh well, it's so unsafe. I can't believe her parents sent her to Japan to be put in that position. But like two very, very interesting stories when I talked to her about it. She said one. Her dad is like a police officer in the UK. So like he had all these contacts in Japan of like people he knew. And it's not like her parents just sent her off to Japan. Like put her on a boat, send her there, and whatever happens. So she's like, that's something that's very not known about her career in Japan is that like she was in pretty good hands.
Right.
And the second thing I think is again, people were like, "Oh, she can't dance, or she's untalented. Why does she deserve this?" She told me that she was scheduled for a performance or an appearance in Japan where she had to be on stage and she had to do this whatever dance routine, but she had said that she didn't have any time to practice it. So they basically sent her the video and she had it on her computer, and so from the time her getting the video, she had to go to the airport, fly to Japan, land in Japan, get to the venue or get to the go to the hotel and then get to the venue where she had to perform. Like she had to learn the routine in transit.
Right.
as she got to the event. So she never had this like, okay, well, here, let me go to the studio, let me practice this for like a couple hours, let me learn this, and then I'll go to. She had to like learn it in transit on the way to the performance, and I was just like, wow, dude, that's crazy. So she's like on the airplane, like imagining how it would actually play out in real life. So I was, and then when she told me, I was like, oh my gosh, like you never hear any of this at all. You never know. You just people automatically assume like she was this undeserving girl that, just hit it big on the internet and all of a sudden was like sent off to Japan to fend for herself.
Yeah, and ultimately anyone can have that happen. It's what you do at that next stage that makes it special.
Absolutely.
It's that, well, I'm either gonna do this or I'm not. That shows what sort of character that person is to follow through. And it's amazing to me because it's not something that I think I could do. And anybody who's happy to do that has got my support 100%.
Oh, we could probably keep going. It's yeah. I mean, it's just Every time you make a point, there's another thing. Like I was like, yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's bring up. But, we should probably find some sort of an ending point in all this.
Yeah, probably.
Any particular
Photobooks, right?
Yeah, Photobooks.
So, well, our point was the differences between all of those things, and again, not judging all Idol fans as being the same, and not judging all Idol genres and everything around it as being all one thing. It's just like entertainment everywhere else. It's all tiny little fractured points. And
I mean,
some are good and some are pretty awful, as we discovered.
Yeah. How do you relay that to these people on the internet?
Well, a lot of them they're just not going to care. They're not going to listen. But I hope that the people who do think, no, that can't be quite right,
use your common sense.
Hear this. Exactly. It is common. It's not believing the scandal. It's not believing sensationalism.
Because okay. I hate to bring up another point, but so remember when baby metal started getting popular, right? It started taking off, and I remember one of the explanations was like, why do people like baby metal? Why do people like baby metal? And like the natural like reaction was, well, it's because they're all pedophiles. They just love these. They have this sick fantasy of these young girls, and like common sense wise, for me, it just doesn't make like. You're telling me that baby metal sells out these 50,000, 100,000 venue of people going to see baby metal. So you're telling me like the majority of those people are all pedophiles and they all just decided to congregate together at this one show. They all came out in record numbers.
Police should be outside the door if that's the case.
Yeah, then just arrest them all. Just everybody in that venue.
Yeah.
Just lock them all up, and the world's problems are all solved. It was great because I remember I have a friend who, when baby metal started taking off, it's funny because being into the Japanese stuff, whenever something like makes it across the pond, when some sort of piece of Japanese culture suddenly gets reported on, I'll have friends who just randomly like message me like, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this? So like baby metal was one of those things. My friend was like, have you ever heard of this group called baby metal? And I was like, yeah. I've heard of them. And he's like, yeah, so they're pretty good. I'm starting to get into them. And so I was really confused because this is just, American guy. He's from Texas. I mean, he like drives a pickup truck. He wears a cowboy hat. He's got these big boots that he wears around works on, his family owns like a ranch, and I think they sell Christmas trees during the holidays. He's a very like Texas kind of like guy.
Right.
And I was like, what about baby metal interests you? Why? Why of all things? And he was like, well, David, I've always liked that genre of music, that very hard, like heavy rock music, but I've never been interested in just having a dude screaming in my ear, like, and I was like, I guess that kind of that makes sense. So like this different voice, this like young kind of female, sweet syrupy voice, going with that kind of different tone, like for some reason he was like, I could dig this. This is something I could suddenly get myself into. And I was like,
But I think it's so good that that's the case, but isn't that the case of music generally? Is you'll just find something that clicks.
Right.
That, well, I don't like that genre, but I quite like it when it sounds like this, and there'll always be something out there that fits.
Yeah,
and it's just a case of finding.
No, and that's the great thing about music, right? Is that you can mishmash genres and different sounds, and it's gosh, we're gonna get into another one. But it's like, again, one of the common arguments I'll hear is like, oh, well, you don't understand the language, or oh, do you even speak Japanese? But I mean, it's music, right? Music is supposed to be universal, right? And not necessarily about the
yeah, I don't see it as a problem. When I want to know what the song is about, I can look up the lyrics.
Right.
I don't necessarily understand everything that's being said, but I know what the song means.
Well, yeah, there's a general consensus that a lot of idol music is just really positive, really upbeat, really feel good about yourself kind of music.
I mean, if we're honest, most of it is.
Yeah, most of it is. Like, oh man,
I don't see that as a bad thing.
No, I mean, that's the genre.
I like it because of that.
No, that's the whole point. That's my argument. Is people are like, well, why are you into idol music? You don't understand it at all. First of all, I believe you can kind of understand a song even if you're not looking at the lyrics. I mean, look at like classical music, right? If you listen to classical music, there's no lyrics, there's no words, but there's definitely a certain like conveyance of emotion that comes from that, right? Yep. I feel like you can get that from any music, to be honest.
No, I 100% agree. The language has never been an issue for me, and if anything, it encourages me to learn the language better. Yeah,
absolutely. And then, so I feel there is this definite, like, you can listen to music and kind of get what they're saying. It's really funny. I had a friend, remember we were talking about the Tokyo Idols? That documentary, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the first song it starts up is the song called Seijun Philosophy. It's like purity, philosophy of purity, right? And I asked a Japanese friend, and she was like, yeah, Seijun kind of refers to like female. It's definitely a very female term. Like you don't use it with males, and it definitely carries that overtone of like virginity.
Okay.
So and it's funny that they showed that song. So at the beginning of that documentary, and it's terrible. It paints a terrible picture. So I actually have a friend. I had him compile all the lyrics of all the AKB songs.
Right.
And so he wrote a program to go search through basically all. He compiled all the lyrics from all the songs. He went and searched and found how many times that word Seijun comes up in AKB songs. And I think we found it to be like 5 or 6 songs of AKB songs that specific word comes up, Seijun. But that's out of.
I was going to say that's a tiny amount of
that's 5 songs out of the total like 1,130 something songs that AKB has.
Yeah.
So like again.
Of course, there was an agenda. There's an agenda to that documentary, and there's an agenda to making sure that's the way people think. And that was fairly subtle because you'd need to go out of your way to find out what that word meant and identify it in the song in the first place. But definitely shows the agenda of that particularly.
Yeah. I mean, that documentary started up, and the first song was like, I want to protect my purity. And you're like, oh, God. But yeah, so yeah, I guess that's maybe we should just end it.
I think because we're going to keep going round and round here because we get.
for me to my end of this is don't listen to my parents. Americans don't just drink beer and watch football and eat hamburgers and pizza. Do some research, find out for yourself, look into it.
That sounds like a very good suggestion to me. It's exactly what I would say. And it's not everybody, and it's not how it's portrayed in the media. There's problems there, but it's not part of idol fandom.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had this open policy. Like, if I'm ever in Japan and you're in Japan and you're interested and you want to go to a show, send me a message. I mean, I will take you to a show, and I'll make sure none of those dirty fans, approach you and, solicit you for whatever.
I just can't imagine that happening. I really can't. It just sounds like this alien landscape that I didn't experience at all. I didn't see anything like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm sure it does, but wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks so much for taking your time. I know. Thanks for squeezing it in because you said you were going out of town next week, right?
I'm off to Barcelona at the end of next
That
week,
that's
and yeah,
that's awesome. That's so
it's very
cool,
busy.
man. The
Thank you.
the coolest guy I know is just going around and reporting on stuff and getting behind the scenes. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool. I can't deny it. It's absolutely. Well,
Okay.
thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
It's
thanks for being on again, and we'll talk to you again, hopefully.
I hope so. Speak to you soon.
Bye, Andy.
Cheers. Bye.